Welcome to the Board Game Marketing Podcast. Let's cue the intro. This is the #1 podcast to learn marketing strategies for your board game. Whether you're just starting on your first game or an experienced designer, you've come to the right place. My name is Nalin, and let's talk marketing for your game. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Board Game Marketing Podcast. Today, we're really lucky to have Ammon on the show, and I'm super excited for everything that he has to share with us today. So, Ammon, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Perfect. So I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and also about your project before we get into the details.
Yeah, so my name's Ammon. I'm an artist. I worked in the corporate world for corporate marketing for Nationwide Insurance for about 17, 18 years. And a year ago, decided to go out on my own, do my own thing. And I'm really enjoying that.
Amazing. Can you tell us a little bit more about T.A.C.O, the game that you launched and got successfully funded?
Yeah, so T.A.C.O is basically sort of a game that I created because I wanted something that I could play with my kids, and my kids and I love gaming. We play board games, we play card games, and we play all sorts of games. But nothing ever really fit the mold that felt perfect. So one day I was just thinking about nothing, and it popped in my head, this idea, and I started building out cards the next day. And now we have T.A.C.O. I illustrated it and designed it and built the whole thing from the ground up.
Wow, I love that this came from kind of a need for you and your own kids to just find something to play together on the table that you all both love.
Oh, and it was fun because I was able to play test it with my kids, and my fiance at the time. She also was playtesting it, so we were playtesting it in multiple states. And I already had a following for some of my other art online, and a lot of those people jumped in and did playtesting as well all over the world. So it was kind of cool to see so many people grabbing a hold of it, jumping in, downloading my playtest set, and sending me just the coolest feedback. There was a group of homeschoolers. I don't even know who these people are, but they had seen that I was playtesting it. So there was these 8 families that got together, and they said that their kids are playing this game 3 to 4 times a week for hours and just giggling and laughing. So it was just fun to hear all the different people that were playing it and how much they enjoyed it.
Wow, yeah, that's really incredible that just random people even have found out about the game before it launched and we're just already playtesting it. This actually leads us to the first question I had. What kind of marketing did you do to prepare for your campaign in the pre-launch stage? How did you kind of drum up interest, capture people's attention, things like that?
Well, so I wasn't really a big part of the gaming community prior to releasing T.A.C.O, and that was a huge mistake I made. When I first started making the game, I figured, I'll make this, and the fans of my art are going to like it, and I was just going to go that route, kind of leveraging, I think I have about 1,400 followers for my art, and they they weren't really all that interested in my game, and I was surprised. But that led me to finding a larger audience of people who were gamers, and so I went on to Facebook and joined a bunch of Facebook groups that I'd never even considered joining before, never thought about, and found all these like-minded people. So prior to that, about 2 months or 3 months before I launched my game, I didn't even realize what a great community there was on Facebook for board game designers. So a lot of the people were just accidents. I started running a few Facebook ads and finding some random people who were interested, started following it, liked my illustration style. Same thing on Instagram. And there was a guy who reviewed games out east, and he was really interested. So he reached out to me really early, and we sent him an early version of the game that he reviewed. But it was all kind of accidental, to be honest. I didn't really start getting strategic about my marketing until about a month before I launched. So
Got it.
I made a lot of mistakes early on, and it definitely like cost me down the road, like when I launched the game on Kickstarter. But even though it's a slower start, I think the fans that we have acquired are like serious fans, not just like, you know, fair weather people who are like, oh, I want to support a game and here's a few bucks kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it was really important that you talked about kind of the audience that you found there. At first, you thought that the people who were your fans of your art already were going to transition seamlessly into an audience for your game. And then you found out that maybe that wasn't so much the case. And so you pivoted and found some other people who are more gung-ho about what you're creating, and just finding that right community and having them interact and kind of support you. It seems like it really propelled your campaign.
Well, what it did is, I learned a lot about who to target through my campaign. It was funny, a really good friend of mine, his name is Brant Brinkerhoff. He is a game designer too, and he was surprised at like the consistent, like, you know, pledges on T.A.C.O through the entire campaign. Like, we never had a lull, we never had a dip. It was just consistently growing. But he was surprised by quite a few things, but one of those was that, you know, by the end of the game, by the end when we were finishing up, and it was a kind of a cool finish to the Kickstarter campaign, he said to me, he's like, man, he's like, if we had like done some things differently right at the very beginning, right, building our audience, this game would have done a lot better. And I agree with him, it would have done a lot better, which is fine, but I think it's still going to do a lot better. And we have some, with the learning that we've taken away from our Kickstarter campaign, we have some serious plans to do some more marketing and reach the people that I know will want this game, but don't know about it yet.
Got it. Yeah. Would you mind talking to us more about what kind of things that, you know, you did, and also what kind of things you both talked about you wish you would have done too? Because I think that's something that other people could really learn from too in their journey.
Sure. So one of the things we did right was showed a lot of the production of the game, and people really liked that. They liked seeing the development of it, and that naturally brought in a lot of people who are interested in followers. We were getting messages like every other day, like, when are you going to launch this? I want this game. I need this game. Unfortunately, when in our initial marketing through Facebook ads and so forth, we were using more generic terms. And so we were getting a lot of visibility, but we weren't actually like capturing the audience that we were looking for. And so those early ads that we ran just had not the greatest targeting on them. What we found was that the people that we did find actually brought a lot more followers in than the people that we were trying to like advertise to. So when somebody would get excited about the game, like their whole family would follow. So that's one of the big learnings, is like kind of like leveraging your fan base, because the people who like your game also know people who will like your game. And that is just such a more consistent, like simple way to message and get your idea out than to try to like find them from scratch. So I think that's lesson learning number one. And lesson learning number two was just how consistently we needed to keep the advertising going. That really helped. At first we were testing out different like strategic messages. So ran one ad, and then we ran another ad with a slightly different message and a different call to action. Then we ran a third ad. And so when we finally found which ones were working the best, when we made those consistent and they just ran constantly, we were starting to get a lot more interaction with people who were interested as well. And the third like kind of learning, I would say, was interacting with the people who are interested. So responding and commenting, quick turnaround on interested messages. Like having that fast response is crucial, because if you're even a couple days late, they're like, what? Who are you? I don't even remember what you're talking about. So things like that. are some of our big learnings.
Got it. Yeah. I wrote down these 3 points that you talked about here. They're really, really important. The first one you mentioned pretty much is kind of like word of mouth marketing. It's always a really strong way to bring other people in if they already have ties with people who are interested. That's kind of, I think, why things like Yelp review works, because they're seeing all these people who are giving a lot of these rankings, and they're trusted in the Yelp community, and some people just are like, hey, this restaurant probably looks really good, so I want to go try it too. How can you tell us more about how you kind of asked people to maybe share with their friends and family, or bring in their friends and family, or was it pretty organic that this happened?
Well, at first it was organic, and then when we were realizing how much more effective it was, we created a launch party, and we just gave some really cool things away and said, invite your friends and get them in on this. Like, you know, on Instagram works really well with this sort of like tag your friend and be entered into a drawing kind of a thing. I think one of the surprising things is that the really simple marketing methods work better than the expensive ads. And, you know, really it ends up benefiting us and our fan base as well. We had just a contest where we had a gross set expansion, and we didn't have enough cards for it. And so we just asked the people to weigh in and say, hey, give us like the grossest ingredient you could think about putting in a taco. And then everybody voted on it, and it started a huge buzz conversation. And people were inviting their friends in to see how ridiculous some of these things were. And then the winner's card is being printed in the expansion. So it was just really fun, and it gave them a way to interact with the brand.
Got it. Yeah, that sounds really relevant, adding a way to get people to just kind of interact with the game, and also bring in friends and families and start that conversation too. You also talked about having people tag their friend in. Was this that same campaign that you're talking about, where you're asking for a growth ingredient, or was it something different?
We did that several times, and using it in different ways. We did it with, hey, like, invite your friends, tag your friends. For every tag, we'll enter you into a drawing. But we also had it like, hey, we need like votes on these, so tag your friends and let them vote which ones they like, because people like to get their friends to support them. And sometimes I think, a person saying, hey, there's something cool online, check this out for a second, that's far more effective than seeing an ad, because the typical ad, a person needs to see it like 5 to 7 times before they click on it, right? It has to create enough interest, and they have to see it in a repetitive way before they're going to take a moment and like click on that and say, okay, I need to know more. So they're going to have that repeated thing. But when your friend says, this is cool, check it out, there's a much more immediate response.
Yeah, absolutely. People trust their friends and family a lot more than just kind of a random ad that they see online.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, you also mentioned that you had a launch party. What kind of went into the launch party? How did you organize it? How did it roll out? Can you tell us more about that? Because I know a lot of people are thinking about launch parties too for their own campaigns.
Well, we were going to do a physical launch party. That was the plan. And I actually have a store here in one of the local malls for my art last holiday season. And the mall, as they saw that I was developing this game and getting ready to release it, they said, hey, we have this huge ballroom. Why don't you use this? We'll give it to you for free, and you can bring in the taco truck, and like people can just come in, and we'll have this like experience. And so we were going to do this really cool experience where like there was going to be all these printed copies of taco for people to play, and people could walk in and get a taco and launch the game. We were going to like broadcast it over Facebook, and then COVID happened. And so we couldn't do any of that. So we ended up just having little contests and changing it to the things like, hey, weigh in, tell us what your grossest ingredient are. And so it wasn't as effective, but it was still fun, and people really enjoyed it.
Got it. Yeah. I guess it also speaks to the need to pivot when things don't go according to plan too. And I wanted to touch upon that a little later too, towards the end of this interview, where you were actually considering canceling the
Mm-hmm.
project and then continue, but then deciding to move forward with it. But before we get to that, I wanted
Sure.
to talk some more about that pre-launch stage a little bit too. You were talking about getting, finding the right audience and getting people who were really interested in your game. And then you mentioned that a month before launch, you got really strategic about your marketing. Can you tell us more about what that means and also what you did when you started getting, like you said, more strategic?
Well, so really it was when I realized like my fan base wasn't going to like follow this. And so I was like, okay, well, they followed my last Kickstarter and it was successful. And I guess I kind of took for granted that I needed to find a totally different audience and build a totally new audience. With my other art, I'd been building that audience for years, but with T.A.C.O, I hadn't. I was a little gun shy because, building a game is not like, like when I told my mom I was going to build a game, she's like, yeah, you shouldn't do that. And so I was a little gun shy because it's like a new arena for me to jump into. So I didn't really tell anybody what I was working on. And then I had a game and I was going to sell it, which was my number one mistake, was just like developing it kind of on my own and then like posting it a little bit later so that people could see what it was. But so when I realized that my audience wasn't going to follow it, I needed to completely rethink that. And I had a moment where I'm like, okay, I need to find the audience for this game, and how do I do that? And that's when I started asking questions I never asked before. Like, maybe there's a board game group on Facebook. Wow, there are a lot of board game groups on Facebook. At the same time, I didn't want to be a noob who was like trying to show up and like leverage an existing system, because that's obnoxious. And so I didn't really heavily promote my game unless I was invited to. I just started building a reputation with people. And I think that's really the key, is like, it's all about relationships. I think in the board game community, if there's anything I've learned this year, it's that building good relationships with people who love board games will earn you more respect than making a board game. And it's not about making a board game or doing it well. It's about being a nice guy and being like interactive in the community. And I think that's the best way to actually build your network, to be honest with you. And then when a person sees your game, even if it's not their flavor, they're like, hey, this is cool. I'm going to share this. And that happened with a lot of people. They're like, dude, you are like awesome. Tell me about your game. And they're like, I'm not really into that kind of game, but I'm going to share this because I know a lot of other people like this game. So I think just being a genuine person in the community is probably the single best way to have an impact or get noticed. Not because you need to get noticed, but because it's just being a nice person.
Yeah, that's such an important point to really bring up too. Like, you can't just come in barreling in and say, hey, back my game, look at my game, right? It's about really forming those relationships and just getting to know people and caring about what they're doing and what they're up to too, before you have a chance to kind of talk about your own game, because people will ask.
That's right. Well, everybody wants to talk about themselves, right? Everybody wants to talk about themselves, and they want people to be interested in what they're making. And that's just human nature. But if all you ever do is talk about yourself and want people to look at your game, but you never give anyone else the time of day, then people can tell you're just using them. And there's a lot of those people in the community. I've seen it over and over and over again since I've joined the community, like late last year. So ultimately, like, I think like the one big takeaway would be just be a good human being. It's the best way to market anything.
Love it. I love it so much. And it's so important because, again, a lot of people who are new to community just don't know where to get started. And it seems like you kind of outlined the steps for people here. Just kind of start joining the community and start offering opinions potentially, or even asking questions and just being a genuine, nice person who's curious about other people.
Yeah. Well, when I first started this, it's funny, I built this game, and my fiance at the time, my wife, she she looked up to see if there were any oh my gosh, my mind just went blank. What is it? Like a convention for board games in Utah, because that's where I had moved. I had moved from Ohio to Utah to be closer to her while we were dating. And she goes, I wonder if there's any conventions. And so like in January, like I think it's January like 10th, she like sent me this text. She said, hey, there's one on the 28th of this month. You should see if you can get in there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I am not comfortable walking into this convention with my game, which isn't like fully marketable at this point. And she's like, no, you need to do this. And I said, okay, I'll take it. And it was Protocon, which is a prototyping convention for board game designers in Utah, it was so cool. And I took my game there and I got the feedback I really needed to feel confident that what I had made was good. That was the first time I was like, okay, this is like legit. Like I can do this. Because I think before that I was pretty much nervous that, you know, I'm a newbie here and I'm not sure this is good. I think it's good, but if there's anything I know from art and marketing, that just because you think something's good, it doesn't mean that everyone else thinks it's good. So really the test of whether something's good or not is you put it into a group of 100 people, and if 85 people are like, hey, this is awesome, you're like, wow, this is a really good thing. If like 5 people like it, you're like, okay, I've built a niche product that is incredibly difficult to sell. So I went to Protocon, and that's when I realized how much I didn't know this community and how much I needed to fix that. And the other thing that I realized was like how much like this community is awesome, and it's something that I've been looking for and not realizing it for a long time. So I walked away from that convention not only with a lot of good friends, but part of the Board Game Designers Guild in Utah, and now I'm helping put on next year's with the committee. So like it's cool, like in a year so much has changed. But again, that goes back to like, how do you market your game? Well, stop thinking about marketing your game. Market who you are and just like be awesome. And I think that's really the key.
Wow, yeah, thank you for the kind of the raw emotion in the story that you just told there about kind of going in, not really being confident about your game, and then coming out having that validation of, hey, this game is actually, you know, can actually succeed, can actually kind of go the distance. For people who are kind of in that same position where they're not really sure how to approach a con or how to approach, you know, validating their idea, what kind of advice would you have for people in that position?
Well, I think it's you just jump in and be open to feedback. If there's anything I learned in art school, it's that feedback is the greatest gift someone will give you. Most people don't like feedback. So people give you feedback and they get defensive. Well, this is my baby. Don't criticize my child, right? This is my heart and soul poured into like cardboard. And but feedback is really a person saying, this is awesome, and with a little bit of work, it could be even better. And that's a compliment. But we, in our society, we don't really take feedback that way very often. So I think being open to feedback is like a crucial key to entering anything close to like launching a game or going to a convention or whatever. It's a really hard thing to teach a person, but that's one of I think that's an important detail.
Yeah, absolutely. Being that open to feedback and being open to change and improving and kind of doing better, just because the people who are giving this feedback want you to succeed too. They're not here to kind of put you down. They're here to help elevate everyone else too.
Well, it's so true. So, and I'll give you a real life example of that. Went to Protocon, took my game. I had this like ridiculous, crappy score card that was going to be like printed, and there's going to be a little like miniature to keep track of your points. Because the way my game works, you're trying to capture enough like basically points to win the game to beat everyone else out. But it was clunky and it didn't work that great, and it wasn't very much fun. And this guy came and he played my game and he said, dude, your game is awesome. Your scoring system blows. And I laughed at him and I said, dude, I know, it's terrible. And so he said, let me think for a second. And he just stared at me while he thought. And I'm like, it was a little awkward because like this dude's just staring at me after telling me how much my scoring system blows. And he smiled. He goes, I got it. He's like, I know how to fix your game and it's going to be awesome. And I said, okay, let's hear it. And he said, take your scoring sheets and throw them away and replace all of your scoring sheets with like a physical point system. And I said, what do you mean? And he's like, you need like a little pile of like tokens that have little tacos on them. And those are your points. And I thought, wow, that's really like smart. Like I like that because it did two things and it fixed my game. So I took that idea home. I wrote it down on my little notepad that I brought for people's feedback. And I took it home and I threw away my scoring cards and instead I got out my 3D printer and I printed off some plastic mini tacos and called them taco points. And one of the things that it did was it made all the points be a pool of points in the middle of the table that everyone could see. And as those points were diminishing and disappearing, that was the natural timer for the game ending for each round. So it was a physical representation of how the game was playing, but it also made it so that you could count and see the physical points on the other side of the table when you couldn't read their cards. So it served two purposes, but it also ramped up the intensity as the round ends and everyone's frantically trying to grab every last point they can get. So not only did it like solve a huge problem in my game listening to this guy give me this feedback, it like took my game way past where I was even hoping it would be to the next level, and it intensified how much fun it was. And the minute that did that, like playtesting was a breeze after that. People were like, this is so much fun. My kids love the plastic tacos. The kids are having fun. Adults can't stop like making designs with them. And really like, I think it was that feedback that probably, and I don't even know the guy's name. I don't even know who this guy was. He was just a guy who came to the playtesting convention. But that one piece of feedback took like a pretty good game and I think made it a much better game.
Well, if this mystery person is out there, I hope you reach out to Ammon and get to, play another round of taco with this idea now come to life.
I know, right?
Yeah. So that was a great example of kind of being really open to feedback and seeing where it takes you. Wow. Like now the game has I've seen all these like different tacos that you're talking about and kind of what it looks like and kind of the shape of it, size of it, and things like that. And it looks beautiful for your game.
Yeah. Well, it like took it from feeling like an interesting card game, and it has way more of a board game feel to it because there's all these components. Another piece of feedback, and this is another real world example. We had the taco trophy, right? Which initially was just something that people could, win at the end of the round, and it gave them a perk at the beginning of the next round, and it was like bragging rights. And then my friend Brant, he said, I wish there was a way we could implement that more into like gameplay so that it's not just like an end of the round token, but it's like an actual something that can be stolen that fits so much with the theme of your game. And so he thought about it for a few days and he called me and he had this great idea and we play tested it and it was so much fun. Like it like ramped up the gameplay and it made it feel more ridiculous. But it was all this feedback that it drove not only the marketing, but also like additional add-ons to the game to try to like ramp up that feeling of kind of ridiculous and funny and sort of like, I want people to start like fighting about things, not fighting, but like, trying to get what they want before the game even starts. And that turned into playmats that were all totally different designs. So there's always a favorite that people are going to try to go for. And it starts the ridiculous before the game begins, right? So all of those things have poured in through feedback and from ideas from our marketing people. But I think being open to, people weighing in on your game is just such a great tool because it makes your game a lot better but it also connects people with that game. And the minute that a person like had their card like recognized as the winner, like they told their whole family, and like more people were like, "Oh my gosh, your card's gonna get published in this game. We got to check it out." So I think it serves two purposes. So there's a real value in being humble enough to like accept feedback and willing to like implement it. And it's a great cycle.
Yeah, and definitely the being open to feedback and then having that kind of change your product, and also that kind of impacting your marketing, and also how to use that to outreach to people and get people excited about the game. That cycle I see over and over again in different Kickstarter campaigns and different product launches too.
Yeah.
So yeah, with that said, I'd love to kind of touch on the campaign itself and the marketing you did during the campaign. What kind of things do you think were effective? What things weren't so effective, and other things you might want to share?
So once our Kickstarter launched, we did pretty good the first day. It didn't do as good as I'd hoped, but we did pretty good. I mean, we obviously funded. We just kept consistent Facebook and Instagram ads going, and they were very effective. We were bringing in consistent interest all day long through the entire course. We never had a dip. They have that like dip curve with the middle. And I think it's because we just consistently kept talking about the game. We consistently kept marketing it. We did not pester people. We did not like spam groups about our game. I think I only posted it once. In fact, it was funny because Gabe, who is the admin over Board Game Design Lab, he actually we had a conference call the night before my game funded, and he said, it was a video conference, and he goes, "Hey, congratulations." He's like, "You did what very few people can do. You launched a game, you were a no-name designer, you had no reviews, and you funded." And I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you. And we were trying to figure out how to actually not fund that night, because with everything we had learned, I knew we could do way, way better on a relaunch. But what's funny is that there was no stopping it at that point. But I think, again, it's about being consistent. And like, this is probably really ironic coming from me, because I have consistently not been online for the last 30 days after launching my game, because I got married and I moved across the country. But it's really about being consistent, and it's about consistent marketing with the right messaging to the right audience. And so what we found is like the tags we're using to target certain audiences were crucial. We started targeting games that were similar to ours and people who liked them. And that was by far more effective by finding similar games. So when we were getting feedback through playtesting, people kept mentioning really specific games. They're like, "Oh, this is like Killer Bunnies," or this reminds me of this. And so what we did is we found those audiences, and we literally sent all of our advertising specifically toward people who liked those games. And that was the most effective thing we did.
Wow. Yeah, that's really, really incredible. It reminds me actually of kind of Amazon and how they power their kind of related searches on the platform itself. There's like, hey, person A also bought what you bought, and after buying this, they bought product B, C, D too. You kind of did exactly that. You found similar games and people who like these similar games, and then you're like, hey, people who like this game might also like T.A.C.O that you're launching at the moment.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I did that really helped during the marketing is we launched a Tabletopia version of our game that was free for people to play, to test out the game. And it got a lot of play, actually. The Tabletopia version, what's nice about Tabletopia is if you're launching a Kickstarter and it goes live and you release your game in conjunction with your Kickstarter, they will put it at the front of their page as new Kickstarter launches. And so we picked up a lot of people through that. That was probably the single best tool we had. And that actually led me, I had reached out to try to find reviews for my game early on in January, and I got like zero response. People were not interested. Some people said we don't do Kickstarter reviews. Other people said we don't like reviewing card games. Other people didn't respond at all. A few of them responded and said, yeah, for like $700 I'll review your game. And I felt like that was disingenuous, like paying for a review, so I didn't actually do that. But what happened with Tabletopia was that one day I just would open up a game and I'd leave it open and people would jump in and we'd play a game and they'd be like, oh my gosh, this was so much fun. How do you know how to play this? And I'd say, oh, I'm the designer. And they'd be like, what? That's so cool. And so one day this woman jumped in, and she was actually a friend of mine on Instagram. Her name is Maximum Player Count. I didn't know it, but that she was doing board game reviews. And she jumped in and was playing the game with me. And she goes, is this on Kickstarter right now? And I said, it is on Kickstarter. She goes, hold on a second. And like, we're like, in a Discord server, like talking. And her boyfriend's right there. And I hear them clicking away on their computer. And she's like, okay, I just backed your game. She's like, your game's awesome. She's like, this is the game me and my girlfriends have been looking for years. We get together like twice a month to play a game, and we've never been super satisfied with it, but it's the best game we found. But this is like the game we've been looking for. And I'm like, awesome. And she's like, why don't you have any reviews? And I said, I couldn't get anybody to do it. I couldn't find people who were willing to review my game. And she goes, okay, this is a major problem. She goes, you have a marketing problem. It's a huge one. She goes, reviews sell games, and you have none. But your game is way more awesome than people realize. She said, your game is like a strategy engine built into like the funniest cartoon deck I've ever seen. And she said, people are looking at your game, because I'm looking at it right now, and I'm not seeing the strategy at all in your like Kickstarter, but this is a strategy game. And the one review that we did get, it was a written review, but didn't get a lot of attention, talked about how like my game was a perfect like strategy teacher for like bringing your friends who don't game into like more gaming world. He called it a gateway game, which was actually the best compliment he gave me in that review. But so we were learning through those sorts of experiences that our game was being really misperceived as a kid's game. It's totally not a kid's game. And we're actually not completely sure how to fix that, other than word of mouth. Word of mouth seems to be the real solution for that, because once people play the game, they're like, okay, this is not what I thought it was going to be. This is way better. And that, to me, was a huge compliment, that they felt like it was way better when they actually got into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that you're getting all this traction, you're getting this phenomenal review from Max Player Account when you're playtesting with her. Can you talk to us more about that point where you're like, I'm thinking about canceling the game, and why you decided to continue going on?
So Maximum Player Count called a friend of hers that owns a bunch of game stores, and he immediately went and backed my game as a retailer. And he actually called me, and we had a long conversation, because she had a conversation with him. And that's when we realized, like, we've kind of missed the boat on this. Like, we've found a lot of people who are interested in our game, but we haven't found, like, our audience. Like, and we knew that. We were really close at that time. We were sitting at about 9,000 out of 10. And so I don't know if I should admit this, but like I like called all my family and friends and said, pull all your backing out, like cancel your pledge, because I'm like, I think we're close enough that we won't actually make it. Most of them didn't do it because they're like, I don't want to be the person that says I didn't back you. Like, in fact, I think only one person actually pulled their pledge, and it was my sister, and she was really upset when she had to be a late backer, which is funny. But what happened was the morning that, so we wanted to pull it because we knew we could do better. And number two, we knew that the marketing, the strategy would like be so much more effective. We knew that we had two problems. We needed people to understand that our game was a strategy game housed in like this really funny kind of twisted comedy deck with illustrations. So it's pretty quirky. When people played it, every person who played it on Tabletopia backed. Like literally every person who played it. They backed within minutes. We found out that their kids actually were starting to like set up games with their friends and play it because of COVID, and they loved it. And their friends' parents were buying it. So what we're kind of expecting is that when all these games go out, right, toward the end of the year, and people playing with their friends, we're going to get a bunch of orders from people who've been playing it with their friends. That's what we're expecting. Because that's kind of how it worked through our marketing campaign. But when we did decide to try to pull it, we didn't want to cancel it because we'd found amazing people, and we didn't want to be disrespectful because these people were like backing this game and putting their money where their mouth is, right? They're saying, okay, we believe in this. We just kind of hoped it would feel naturally, but we made a decision that we weren't going to cancel it. And I'm really glad we didn't. Even though we could have made a lot more money, I think. We didn't cancel it, and the next morning we had like a gap of about $300. And this awesome dude in Canada, one of our backers, literally was like, what are we going to do? We're like $300 short. And he just went and filled it up. He pledged the rest. About 9 minutes before the end. And then about $500 more came in on top of that, like right there at the very end. So I'm glad we didn't, because there were people who really wanted that game. And he sent me a really nice message saying, I need this game. I love tacos. And I've never seen a game like this. And I have to have it. And it's worth paying $385 for. Which is an amazing compliment. I mean, amazing compliment. So we decided, you know what? If people believe this much in it, we're gonna go and do it the slower way. Instead of having a big launch, we're gonna build it slower, and we're gonna do it right. But again, it means that we're finding the right people, and that audience is who we really want playing our game. They're the people who are like, "This is awesome, and we love it, and this makes me happy."
That's really an amazing story. I was kind of sitting on the edge of my seat there as you were talking about like those few minutes left and then the last pledge coming in, and someone actually just kind of upping their pledge to put you guys over the finish line. That's incredible to hear for a Kickstarter campaign.
So he did it, and 3 other people sent me messages at the same time he did it saying, okay, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to pledge more. Like, this has to happen. This has to happen. And so like my phone was blowing up with people who were backing this game, who'd been watching it, wanting it to fund. And like at that point, like you can't cancel a game just to make a bigger buck. That's stupid. Like at that point, you have to like make this game for them because they believed in it and they believed in me making it. And at that point, you're like, okay, we're doing this. We're going to do it a little bit slower, and that's great. We're going to have to do a lot more marketing on the back end. And you know what? It's worth it because these people are going to get the game that they help bring to life.
I love it. I just love how it speaks to the power of an audience and finding the right audience and having those super fans who will just really, really support you all throughout the project. And beyond this, I'm sure that they're going to come back and leave glowing reviews and just continue following along in your journey too. That's
right. Yeah. So we've been really blessed. We began finding our audience late, and that is really sad. And it's not about money. It's about the fact that I know there's a lot more people who will love this game. So now we just got to find them. And that's the hard part. So we're going to do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and just sharing all of these insights about the campaign and about marketing and about just kind of growing as a designer too. I'd love to understand too, if listeners want to get in touch with you or kind of follow along, where should they head to? Where can they find you?
Absolutely. So I'm really active with people responding, so they can message me on my website for the game. It's called tacosforever.org. It's pretty funny. Or they can follow us on Facebook. I think if you just type in Taco the Game, it'll pull right up. You'll see a big flying taco. And we're also on Instagram under Taco the Game with underscores in between. Taco the Game with like under dashes. I don't remember what that's called. The little line next to the O that's on the ground. So, but yeah, or they can reach out to me directly. So my name is Ammon Anderson. My email is ammonanderson@gmail.com. So if they're interested, they can shoot me a note and I'll respond.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much again for your time, Ammon.
Oh, you bet. Thanks so much for asking me all these questions, and especially thanks for, like, your group is awesome on Facebook, and I've learned a lot in there and appreciated so many of the things that you're doing, because you're doing exactly kind of the same thing that I've been talking about. Like, you're building a reputation in a community and you're giving back to that community. And I think that's why your group is such a success. So, like, you're a real world example of exactly some of the things that I've been talking about.
Well, thank you so much for the kind words. I really appreciate it, and that it's, you know, kind of offering value for you too as a game designer and marketer now.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for being on the show.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Board Game Marketing Podcast. For daily tips and advice, find us in the Board Game Marketing group on Facebook. See you next week.